Welcome to another deep dive, and today we're going to be tackling Linux.
Oh, Linux, really interesting choice.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we've actually got a really interesting mix of sources for this one.
Mm.
We've got, of course, the Wikipedia article, which gives us, that nice kind of broad overview.
Yeah.
But then we've got a couple of YouTube videos that I found. One of them's like a documentary style,
Right.
and one is more of like a, one of those experts explain kind of thing. So I think we've got a good mix of like
Yeah.
historical details and then some like, more opinion and commentary and stuff from people who really know their stuff.
Yeah. I'm excited. It's a big topic, right? Like, where do you even begin with something like Linux?
Well, that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to equip you, dear listener, with a
Right.
with like a good foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you were going to go into a meeting and somebody was talking about Linux and you were like,
Mm-hmm.
"Wait, what is all this?" You'll be ready,
Yeah, like a Linux 101.
Yeah, exactly.
But, in a fun way, not like a boring lecture.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're just curious or if you want to brush up on some stuff, yeah, this will be perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. So where we're going to begin
Yeah.
is actually we need to take a step back before Linux even existed
Okay.
because the story really begins back in 1969 with the creation of Unix.
Wow. Okay, so we're going way back.
Yeah. And this was thanks to Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie at Bell Labs.
Yeah.
And they, I mean, I'm not a programmer or anything, but it seems like Unix was a pretty big deal.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Unix was like this groundbreaking operating system. Like you said, it was 1969. So much of what we take for granted today just didn't exist.
Right.
And Unix, it was elegant, it was innovative, and I think one of the biggest things was it was written in C, which was this new programming language at the time, and C made it really portable.
Well,
So that means that it could run on, all these different kinds of computers, which was kind of unheard of back then.
yeah, that makes sense.
So that helped it spread like crazy, through universities, through businesses. And in a way, it really laid the groundwork for, like I said, a lot of the systems we use today, including Linux.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So, a lot of our digital world can be traced back to this one operating system.
Yeah. I mean, that's the crazy thing about these deep dives. Like, you really start to see these connections everywhere.
Totally, yeah. But of course, as with most great innovations, the road wasn't always smooth.
Right.
Our sources mention that there was a legal battle that began in 1977
Okay.
with UC Berkeley. They developed their own version of Unix called the Berkeley Software Distribution, or BSD.
BSD. Yeah. I've heard of that.
And it seems like this really created some tension with AT&T, who owned the original Unix code.
Yeah. No, this was a big deal. I mean, this basically kicked off what a lot of people call the Unix wars.
The Unix wars?
Yeah, it sounds dramatic, right? But it really was this period of like intense legal battles and a lot of uncertainty in the software world because it brought up these fundamental questions about who owns code, who can modify it, who can distribute it.
Right.
And, this was way before open source was like a common thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it really, in a way, it kind of stifled innovation because everyone was afraid of being sued.
I see.
And it's really interesting because this whole fight for software freedom, it's directly related to the rise of open source, which, as we know, is like a core principle of Linux.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so these early legal battles, they kind of unintentionally laid the groundwork for this whole movement.
Wow, that's almost poetic in a way.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, so we've got, the stage is set. We've got this legal battle over software freedom.
Right.
And right around this time, we get introduced to another key figure, Richard Stallman.
Oh, yeah, Stallman.
Yeah. In 1983, he starts the GNU project.
Yeah.
And the goal was to create a completely free Unix-like operating system.
Okay.
And this is also when we first encounter the GNU General Public License, or
Wow.
GPL.
The GPL, yeah, absolutely crucial to the whole story.
Yeah, it seems like it. So can you maybe break down for us what's so important about this GPL?
Okay, so imagine a world where all software is proprietary, right? Like you have to pay for it. You can't really see what's going on under the hood. You can't modify it. You can't share it. That's kind of how things were back then.
Yeah.
And then comes the GPL. It's this legal framework that basically says, hey, the software is free. Free to use, free to distribute, and crucially, free to modify.
Oh, interesting.
And that last part is huge because it means that anyone can take this code, improve it, add to it, and then share those improvements with everyone else.
Wow.
Yeah, it's this radical idea of collaboration and openness, and it's really the foundation of the whole open source movement.
I see. So it's really a different way of thinking about how software should be developed and shared.
Exactly. It's not just about making money. It's about building something together, something that benefits everyone.
Okay, so we've got the GPL, we've got the GNU project gathering steam. But it sounds like they were missing a key piece of the puzzle, a kernel?
The kernel, right. So for those who might not know, the kernel is like the heart of the operating system.
Sure.
It manages the system's resources, it talks to the hardware, and it basically makes everything run smoothly.
So it's kind of like the engine, the brain of the whole thing.
Exactly, exactly. And the GNU project, they were working on their own kernel called the herd, but it was a really complex project and it wasn't really moving very quickly.
So they had this great idea, this great philosophy, this legal framework,
Yeah.
but they didn't have the engine.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a beautiful car body, but no engine to make it go.
Oh, okay. I get it.
Yeah.
So that's where Andrew Tannenbaum and MINIX come into the picture in 1987.
MINIX, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is an interesting part of the story.
Right.
So Tannenbaum was a professor, and he created MINIX as this kind of teaching tool.
Okay.
It was a simplified version of Unix, something students could actually play around with, modify, and understand how operating systems worked.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it was influential in its own right,
Yeah.
but it also had limitations. One big one was it couldn't run on the Intel 386 processor, which was becoming really popular at the time.
Oh, I see.
And its code wasn't fully open. Like, you couldn't just modify it and redistribute it however you wanted.
So it wasn't quite there yet.
Not quite. So you have this situation where there's this real need for a powerful, free, and adaptable kernel.
Right.
And that's where Linus Torvalds steps onto the scene in 1991. He's a computer science student at the University of Helsinki, and he's like, frustrated with the limitations of what's out there. He wants something better, especially for his own Intel 386 PC.
Oh, so he just takes matters into his own hands.
Yeah, he does. And it starts as this personal project, almost like a side hustle, just tinkering around, trying to build something that works for him.
Right.
And little does he know, this little project of his is going to change the world.
It's amazing how often that happens, right? Like somebody just wants to solve their own problem, and they end up creating something that impacts millions of people.
Exactly. It really speaks to the power of individual passion, doesn't it? Like, Linus wasn't motivated by profits or fame.
Yeah.
He just wanted to create something cool and useful.
Yeah.
And the world responded.
Totally.
Yeah, it was this perfect storm of the right technology at the right time and with the right philosophy behind it.
I love it.
And that's how Linux was born.
It's incredible.
Pretty amazing.
And what's funny is that the name Linux almost didn't happen.
Really?
Yeah, our sources said that Linus originally wanted to call it Freaks.
Freaks, what is that?
Like Freax.
Yeah.
Apparently it was like a combination of free, freaks, and X for Unix.
Oh, okay. I kind of like it. It's got a certain ring to it.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. But luckily for us, like an FTP server admin at his university just renamed it Linux without asking him.
Wow, that's bold.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to imagine it being called anything else now.
Freaks. No, it doesn't quite have the same impact.
No, Linux just works. It's got that, that techie feel.
Yeah, it's iconic.
It is. But speaking of names,
Oh.
this is where we get into that whole GNU Linux debate.
Yes, the great naming controversy.
Yeah, because so much of the operating system actually relied on software from the GNU project.
Right.
Some people feel like that contribution should be acknowledged in the name.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just the kernel, right? It was the whole ecosystem that made Linux work.
Exactly.
So, from their perspective, GNU Linux is the more accurate and fair name.
Yeah, I get that, but Linux is definitely shorter and easier to say.
And let's be honest, it's the name that caught on.
It is.
So I think it would be interesting to hear what our listener thinks about all this.
Yeah, definitely let us know in the comments.
But, naming controversies aside,
right.
Let's talk about what really made Linux successful. Open source.
Yeah, open source seems like it was a turning point.
It was huge. I mean, think about it. The code is freely available. So that means that literally thousands of developers from all over the world could contribute to the Linux kernel, adding features, fixing bugs, making it work on all kinds of hardware.
Wow, that's incredible.
And this collaborative approach, fueled by the GPL, it just made it so different from like the proprietary systems.
Right, like the closed off, one company controlling everything kind of thing.
Exactly. It's like this global community coming together versus, a walled garden.
Yeah, I like that, walled garden. And all that collaboration, it led to the rise of Linux distributions.
Distributions. Oh, yeah.
Which is where things get really interesting for users.
Yeah, totally. Think of distributions like, different flavors of Linux.
Okay.
Each with its own personality, its own strengths.
Like ice cream, almost.
Yeah, kind of. You've got your chocolate, your vanilla, your strawberry, but for operating systems.
Oh, I like that analogy.
So you had these early distributions like Slackware,
Right.
Debian.
Okay.
They were like the pioneers. But then come these major families, the ones that really shaped the landscape.
Okay, very cool.
So you've got Red Hat, which is known for its stability,
right.
its focus on enterprise solutions.
Right.
And actually, fun fact, Red Hat has been acquired by IBM.
Oh, wow. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. But then you've also got Fedora.
Fedora, yeah.
Which is community-driven.
Oh.
Really known for being cutting edge.
Mm.
In fact, Fedora is Linus Torvalds' own personal distro of choice.
Oh, really? That's a pretty good endorsement.
It is. And then, of course, you've got Debian, known for its stability and security.
Yeah, Debian, that's a big one.
Which makes sense because it's actually the foundation for Ubuntu.
Oh, right.
Which is, the distro that really made Linux accessible to everyday users.
Right.
Because Ubuntu really focused on ease of use.
Yeah.
Like a smooth installation process,
right.
A desktop environment that was familiar to people who were coming from Windows or Mac OS.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. It was crucial, like it brought Linux to a much wider audience.
So we've got like the stable Debian, the cutting-edge Fedora,
right?
User-friendly Ubuntu. It seems like a lot of bases are covered there.
Yeah, there's something for everyone.
Our sources also mentioned Arch Linux.
Arch. Yeah.
What makes Arch special?
Arch is for the tinkerers.
The tinkerers.
Yeah, the people who really want to customize their system to their exact specifications.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's known for being minimalist.
Okay.
So it comes with only the bare essentials, and you kind of build it up from there.
Oh, I see. So you really have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart.
Okay.
But for the right person, it's amazing.
So, it's amazing how Linux can cater to such a diverse range of users.
It really is.
From the casual web surfer to the hardcore programmer.
Yeah, and that's part of its beauty.
And speaking of amazing, we can't forget to talk about where Linux is today.
Oh.
Like, this thing went from a student's hobby project to a true technological force.
It's mind-blowing, right? I mean, Linux is everywhere now.
Everywhere.
From the smallest embedded systems to the most powerful supercomputers.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Web servers, cloud infrastructure.
Wow.
Financial systems, scientific research, space exploration. You name it, Linux is probably running it somewhere.
I read somewhere that all of the top 500 supercomputers in the world run Linux.
That's right. All of them.
That's incredible.
It is. And, let's not forget about Android.
Right. And
the most popular mobile operating system in the world.
Yeah.
Built on a Linux kernel.
Oh, wow.
Billions of people are using Linux every day without even knowing it.
That's crazy.
I know, right? It's just a testament to how powerful and flexible and reliable Linux is.
And, it all started with this student just wanting to create something better.
Right, and wanting to share it with the world.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful story about open source, about community-driven development.
It makes you wonder what the tech landscape would look like if Linus had just kept it to himself.
Totally different world, I think.
And speaking of sharing,
yeah,
one of the most interesting developments in recent years has been Microsoft's shift towards embracing Linux.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Remember when, Microsoft and the open source community were like sworn enemies?
Oh, yeah, like cats and dogs.
Yeah, and now Microsoft is like, hey, Linux is pretty cool.
It's amazing how things change, right? I mean, Microsoft, they were the poster child for proprietary software.
Right.
And now they're integrating Linux into their own ecosystem.
Yeah, they even developed the Windows subsystem for Linux.
WSL, yeah.
Which basically lets you run a full Linux environment right inside Windows.
Like, they went from fighting it to embracing it.
It's crazy.
The times they are a-changin'.
They really are. I mean, it's like they realized...
It's like, on a practical level, Microsoft saw how powerful Linux was becoming.
Right.
Especially in, cloud computing and servers and all that.
Yeah.
And they wanted to be a part of that.
Makes sense.
But also, I think there was a genuine shift at Microsoft. Like, they were trying to be more open, more collaborative.
Yeah.
And embracing Linux was part of that.
That's a huge change for them.
It is. It really shows how much the tech world has evolved.
For sure. So, we've talked about all this success, all this collaboration.
Right.
But Linux has also had its fair share of controversy.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Like
definitely.
debates, legal battles, all that.
It wouldn't be a good origin story without some drama, right?
Right. Exactly. So I'm curious, what's your take on some of these conflicts that have shaped Linux?
Hmm. Well, let's start with that naming thing.
Yeah, Linux versus GNU Linux.
Yeah, because people get really passionate about this.
They do.
And I can see both sides. Like, you've got Stallman and the GNU project saying, hey, GNU Linux is more accurate
Right.
because it recognizes, the role of GNU software.
Right.
It's about giving credit where credit is due.
Right. Right.
And it's about these principles of software freedom.
Okay. Yeah.
But then you've got others saying Linux is just simpler.
Yeah. That's what everyone knows.
Exactly. It's more practical. And to be fair, it's what Linus himself prefers.
Right.
So from their perspective, focusing too much on the name is kind of a distraction.
Yeah. Yeah.
From the bigger picture, which is this amazing operating system that's benefited so many people.
So it's like, what's in a name? Right.
Right. I think ultimately it comes down to personal preference,
Yeah.
what feels right to you.
And like, what are your values? Right.
Yeah, exactly. But what matters is that the conversation is happening.
Right.
That people are thinking about these issues.
For sure. Okay, so beyond the naming thing, there were some actual legal challenges.
Oh, yeah, some big ones.
Like, our sources mentioned this heated debate back in 1992.
Oh, between Linus and Andrew Tannenbaum.
Yeah, the creator of MINIX.
Yeah, the infamous Linux is obsolete debate.
Linux is obsolete.
Yeah, Tannenbaum was a big deal in the operating systems world.
Okay.
And he was really critical of some of Linus's design choices.
Like what?
Well, he argued that Linux had this monolithic structure, which meant that all the core functions were bundled together in the kernel.
Right.
And Tannenbaum thought that was an outdated approach.
Okay.
He thought microkernels were the future.
Microkernels.
Yeah, where the kernel is smaller and more modular.
Okay.
And he predicted that Linux would just get overtaken by these newer systems.
That's a pretty bold prediction.
It was, especially considering, well, how things turned out.
Yeah, kind of ironic.
Totally. Linux has been incredibly adaptable, and the monolithic kernel hasn't held it back at all.
And it runs on, everything now.
Right. Tannenbaum also criticized Linux for being tied to the Intel 386.
Okay.
But it's been ported to pretty much every major computer architecture out there.
So, safe to say, he was wrong.
Yeah, sometimes even the smartest people get it wrong.
Especially with technology.
It's hard to predict the future.
For sure, for sure. But that debate was nothing compared to what happened in the early 2000s.
Oh, yeah, the SKO group.
Yeah, our sources said that SEO claimed IBM had illegally copied Unix code into Linux.
Oh, yeah, it was a whole mess.
Yeah, lawsuits, threats, the whole tech world was kind of freaking out.
It was a big deal. SKO had acquired some of the rights to the original Unix code.
Okay.
And they went after IBM and other companies that were using Linux, demanding licensing fees, even threatening to shut down Linux development.
What? Really?
Yeah, and if they had won their case, it would have been disastrous.
For Linux, but also for open source in general, right?
Absolutely. It could have undermined the whole movement.
So what happened?
Well, luckily for us, SKO's claims were basically debunked.
Okay.
Their evidence was weak, their arguments didn't hold up.
Right.
And after years of fighting, they actually ended up filing for bankruptcy.
Oh, wow. So Linux survived.
It did, but it was a close call.
And I bet it scared a lot of people off.
Yeah, it created a lot of uncertainty, especially for businesses.
It's a shame, that this amazing technology had to go through all that.
It is, but it also shows how strong Linux is and how passionate the community is about protecting it.
Okay, so, wow, we've covered a lot.
We have.
From those early beginnings to the controversies to, where Linux is today.
Quite a journey.
It is. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
yeah,
what are your final thoughts? What does the story of Linux tell us, and where do you think it's going next?
For me, Linux is just this incredible story about collaboration.
Yeah.
About people coming together to build something better.
Yeah.
And about believing in the power of open source.
It's really inspiring.
It is. And I think looking ahead, Linux is only going to get more important.
Really?
Yeah, it's already at the heart of so many new technologies like cloud computing, AI, the Internet of Things.
Right.
And with that global community behind it,
Yeah.
I think it's going to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
I love it. Well, this has been fantastic.
It has.
And for you, dear listener, I hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for Linux and its incredible story.
Yeah, it's more than just an operating system.
It is.
It's a philosophy.
So whether you're a techie or just, curious about the world,
Keep learning.
I encourage you to explore the world of Linux.
There's a whole community out there waiting to welcome you.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.